Yeah, that part was pretty fascinating to me. So then I started building out this like river question system of what can I ask myself on every river? What can I teach anyone to ask themselves on any river? So that was kind of how all this stuff came to be. So yeah, what do you got in mind for our lesson today, Mr. Vanja?
Yeah, so many players come to me basically and tell me, yeah, I feel lost in river nodes. This often comes from like kind of lack of a plan. So today we prepared for you guys something like a framework that will help you to maneuver through the river with more confidence and like kind of building a structured thought process that you will make more correct decision. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I was working on some poker strategy in my AI based off of some of your teachings, and that's how this idea came to be. Just having a system you can ask yourself on every river, how you can match up the math, the data with the bet size, with the value combination, with being able to identify their range based on the size they bet and how many value hands and bluffs they have. So those are kind of what I'm working at now. So I'm hoping that after this session, I'm gonna feel like a river god. So I appreciate it. Look at this. I love this. Let's go. Let's get into it.
Yeah. So in general, the river is kind of the most like the easiest street to play, but it feels counterintuitive. But it's also the most important street. Yeah, like there are no more cards to come. Hand values are fixed, but the pot is very large, so mistakes become very costly. And to prevent that, we built like this. The most studied street is like flop, because that's where the most action happens. And then river is kind of pretty easy often, because we like, again, hand values are fixed. There's no more card to come, but people just forget how costly mistakes can become. So yeah, I think the most important street is just to study river.
So you think that you should study the river more than the flop?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's why you think it's easy, because you've been studying the river every day. So now you're like, of course it's easy. Okay, cool. I'm excited. Yeah, I've been. Let's go. Let's get in, starting with the default. Okay, perfect. I'll let you walk through it.
Yeah. So we built for you guys like a 4-step thought process, and we should always start with the default, like what's supposed to happen in theory. Many players tell me, yeah, it doesn't really make sense to think about that against weaker opponents, because they don't think in these GTO principles. But it's not about that. It's more about that we should know what's supposed to happen, because if we know what's supposed to happen, we are able to find mistakes, right? Mm-hmm. And I want to show you a hand just to illustrate this. This is a spot where the button opens. We are in the small blind. We threw at the button, and the button calls. And now we're on ace queen 2. We're gonna basically range bet for the 20% sizing, and the button calls with pocket 3s. So what do you think? How can we punish our opponent in the future for not folding pocket 3s on the flop?
So you're saying us as the small blind who 3-bet and then we range bet the flop.
Mm-hmm.
How can we punish the guy with pocket 3s on later streets? So I guess maybe you know that if they have obviously versus the small bet on the flop, they're going to be defending really wide. Some people are going to be defending a little bit less. Some people are defending a little bit more. So if they have pocket 3s, I guess you could think about it a few different ways where you might want to let them potentially bluff that off more often than not, because maybe they're over bluffing pocket 3s in the turn, they're over bluffing pocket 3s in the river. So that could be something like that. Or I guess it could be something where you know that you have more fold equity on the turn. So I guess you could build a more aggressive strategy and maybe build a more passive strategy on the turn.
Yeah. So it's kind of a trick question, because people are meant to continue pure with pocket 3s. There's no folding. Like there's some raising, some calling, but there's no folding, because pocket 3s has enough equity and can also bluff pretty good on future streets. Like for example, if you check the turn on an 8, these pairs bluff very pure.
Pure, yeah.
Yeah, but
This took me a while to learn the whole pure bluffing with the low pairs as your bluffs, because it isn't really a thing in heads up, which I play mainly heads up. So
Yeah.
In 6 max, I found this interesting because you don't have as many bluffs, so you need to start looking for I call it like the fourth pair principle, where your fourth pairs is the hands that you can start to bluff. And then I guess what scares me, Vanja, is that on the river, I'm not sure if I'm always supposed to be going through with this as my bluff, because if I don't have many bluffs on the turn, then like on the river, then I'm not gonna have any bluffs. So I kind of have to just go with these hands as a pure strategy, which seems where I end up in blunders when I drill that strategy, because then I bluff the river and I was like, oh, 8 BB mistake. I'm like, oh crap, okay. So not every spot is really created equal. So that's one thing I'm working on right now.
Yeah. So the problem here is basically that if you think that we should fold pocket threes on the button, then we basically make wrong assumptions, and that's why it's pretty important that we know what's supposed to happen in theory, right? That we're able to exploit our opponents, and that's why as our first step is very important that we know what's supposed to happen in theory, because then when we see deviations, we can exploit our opponents on a deeper level. So that's
meaning that if you don't see them bluffing pocket threes or pocket fours or pocket fives in this turn when check to, then you're able to pick up on that in real time and know that they don't have enough bluffs on later streets. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, exactly.
Interesting. Yeah, that's what I've been trying to get better at, picking up on when I see your cards and I see your hands playing live poker. You see the hands, and then it's like, okay, now you gotta, okay, do I overuse the information? I underuse the information? It's just, I'm very used to like online and having data tracking, and then when you go to the live arena and test out your skills, a whole different skill set you have to build. You know what I mean? Then you have to figure out, okay, well, I saw this hand, I saw this data, I saw this action take place, and then how much credit or how do I use that to build out my exploits from what I think I should be doing in theory.
Yes. The second step is then that we should ask ourselves what our opponents are doing wrong, right? So basically thinking about, okay, are they folding too much? Are they calling too much? Like basically thinking about the situation you're in and ask yourself fitting questions. And because you know what's supposed to happen in theory, you'll also be able to pick up on deviations and then be able to tell what they're doing wrong. Yeah, and then step 3 and 4 are basically thinking about how we can exploit our opponents. So that's kind of the thinking thought process we should.
So you just ask yourself these 6 questions, and then from that you start to get some answers, and then you have like, I guess, would you say this is like your data point you'd go to, and then if you want to make a different decision from what you believe the answers to these questions are, then or how do you think about actually using these in real time?
Yeah, because many players feel lost on the river, like not sure what to do. And this thought process will help you to have a more clear thinking thought process, basically, and come to a better decision.
Cool. All right, you want to walk us through your hand and then show
definitely
us how you use it?
So let's take a look at.
I mean, are you asking these 6 questions in real time? I mean, when you're at the table, so I feel like we internalize these questions at some point, but then we maybe forget.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? So you kind of have to be intentional, I think, when you're doing it. But
so
it sounds like
if you're at the beginning of your journey, I think it's definitely helpful to go through this thought process basically every time. But if you get better and better and more experienced, then you definitely like it becomes kind of automatic sometimes.
Yeah, just pattern recognition takes over, and
exactly
that's kind of what I think too. But then now I'm thinking maybe I'm missing something. So I'm gonna go through these questions. I'm gonna put this into my game for the next month and really test it out.
Yeah. Okay. So this hand is as followed. It's a single raise pot. The button opens. The big blind calls. The button bets the flop for 3/4. We defend in the big blind. The turn on the 3 in clubs, flush completing, it goes check check. And on the turn now we have the option. So here on the river, it's basically we mainly, like, the river is basically the only street where mixing can become mandatory, because there's no more card to come, and we often have two different hand classes that really want to bet different sizes, right? For example, here a 10 wants to go small, and then like a set or flush really wants to go big. So you kind of need to mix here. And yeah, so we start by thinking about, okay, what's supposed to happen in theory, right? So we know, okay, on this river, our main range part is basically 10 here. So we build a range around our 10x, like this range part. Then we have a range part that really wants to go larger, like a flush, like these flushes here. And then we have hands like a sets or two pairs that also want to pick a certain sizing. So if I choose my sizing here, basically, I think about, okay, what is villain doing wrong now? And let's go through this. Let's say we go for the small sizing here, 20%. We see that villain is supposed to raise with some overpairs, and also supposed to raise with some top pairs, and always supposed to raise with his two pairs, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then we go to check, and he's also supposed to bluff some pairs with one club, for example, like these ace-5s or king-7 with a club.
Mm-hmm.
If you go to check, villain is supposed to reopen the action with any overpair and also decent amount of 10x, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's the theory basically. And now if I face my opponent, I start to think, okay, what is he doing wrong, right? And let's say we face someone that's a bit more on the nitty side, not really bluffing much against our betting, not really raising much, like not raising very thinly basically, and also if getting checked too, like being scared of the flush, not really reopening enough.
Which would probably be a normal opponent, right? A normal opponent probably not raising enough, and they're not value betting enough. They're just going to play more passive. They're probably going to be calling your 20% bet very often, very rarely raising it. And then when you check, they're probably going to be missing some value bets. They might even be bluffing maybe a little bit too many hands. I guess those are my base assumptions off of most players.
Yeah, absolutely. What we can see here, that for example, if we take a look at our sets, pocket 5s and pocket 7s, we see they're always using larger sizing. When we take a look at our flushes, we see that there's a lot of checking and betting small as well. Like, what you think is that our flushes that are stronger than our sets want to go with smaller sizes.
So your question is, why do I think that the flushes want to go with a smaller size?
Yeah, like there's a lot of small sizing going on with these flushes.
I guess because he's supposed to raise 16%, so you want to be able to induce and have enough hands that you can call with. And then I guess a set might block some of the hands he's going to call with, I guess. Maybe something like that.
Yeah, so when thinking about the river, and so basically every hand in our range wants to maximize the AB, right? And the hand like pocket 5s and pocket 7s can't go for the block jam because it's not strong enough, right? So if you block, villain raises, we can't jam. So our sets basically make the most money by directly going for the large sizing. But if we have a hand like, for example, ace 8 in clubs, if we go for the overbet, we see that our opponent is not raising much, right? He's raising.
Never raising.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So we don't really get the money we want by choosing the overbet. So we basically go for the block or for the check with most of our flushes.
Right. But if they're not raising enough, would you then exploitative thought process be that I have to notice that, and then I might want to go with the bigger size because they're just
Exactly.
not raising enough?
That's the next step, because that's what I note logged. Because by knowing what's supposed to happen in theory, we know he's to raise, we'll take a look, against the 20%. We know he's supposed to raise 10x sometimes. He's supposed to raise over pairs, and he's supposed to raise all 2 pairs. And if he's not doing this, then there's a very different output right now. Right? We can compare this by clicking here to node log. Oh, that's the wrong button. We can compare this. That's a very cool feature here in Wizard by clicking on compare nodes.
Do you want to explain? So what exactly did you change? So you basically just do you want to show us what you changed from the first sim that's going to make this different output?
Yeah. So
this is one of the most important things. Is you're basically saying, okay, I'm going to make an assumption about their strategy. I'm going to assume that they're doing this. Therefore, I'm planning my strategy against that type of player. And if I got a GTO player, then I got to revert back to this thought process. But now, okay, I've identified this weakness in their game, and now I'm able to use the wizard to actually look at what the alternative strategy could be, and then maybe figure out why we're using that strategy. So I think that's like pretty important part. But figuring out, how do we adjust the numbers? Are they raising 4%? Is it 5%? Being able to really color those hands in, I think, is the big skill right now with the AI. So I'm curious to see how you think about that, how you set it out.
So what I changed was against the 20%, I changed that in position is not raising any over pairs and not raising any top pairs. And also not finding enough bluffs here. That's what I changed, basically.
Yeah, right. pretty and a pretty normal change, right?
Yeah.
You're basically just, I mean, I think that makes a lot of sense. They're not bluffing as much with the bottom of their GTO, because typically in the wizard, they're always going to be bluffing some hands on the river in the no main hand or king high range or best blocker range or whatever. So if you're going to take away their bluffs, those are typically where I look from. I go, okay, he's not bluffing that, he's not bluffing that. Where are some big advantages and kind of what are some takeaways? So okay, so that makes sense to me.
Yeah, and against the check, we do the same. Villain is not be opening enough. He's checking back with his over pairs and checking back 10x, and also checking back these king highs and ace highs. People might think they have shorten value with, and I think that's a pretty reasonable response.
Yeah, basically value bet in 2 pairs, maybe bluff in some of his best bluffs that he needs to bluff here, and then mainly just made up a lot of value. Makes sense to me.
Yeah.
So now the strategy goes crazy. This is different. Yeah. Interesting.
So you can see that from this strategy here, where we basically mainly just go small with our very strong flushes to be able to block jam, right, to get all the money in, and to also kind of balance our small betting range. We never put our strong flushes into our small betting range. We directly go for the 7x pot jam here, right? And that's a big change, because what I see people are doing wrong is they think, okay, I want to get called, so they bought small, and that has some merit because we get called more often, but we can't really maximize for our strongest hands because we're never getting raised enough. And if you know you're not getting raised enough by your opponent, you should always put your strongest hands into the big betting line and never into the small betting line, basically.
And so, okay, so in this scenario, it looks like ace 10 is ace 10 suited, which I'm assuming is not flush. They kind of mix that size where they do have some small bets with that. Is that a function of them just like blocking the best? I guess they don't have ace 10 of clubs in this one, or
no?
Am I imagining it or something?
Yeah,
I guess they probably are just betting the turn with that one, right?
It probably raises on the flop. Ace 10 clubs.
Oh yeah, for the big blind. Sorry, that actually makes a lot of sense. Yeah, because he probably 3-bets that pre-flop too. So yeah, true.
Yeah. So the big changes here are that we can block more often because we're not getting raised enough. So we can realize more equity. We see, for example, here if we go back to it's blocking this here. We can see that we don't block all top pairs, right? Because when we get raised, we have a pretty tough decision. But yeah, if not getting raised enough, we're gonna block all top pairs now pure. So that's a big change. We can go thinner for value, and the second big change is that we never put any strong hands into a small betting line, basically.
Mm-hmm. So if you look at like the little filter tree, they're really not even bluffing. It looks like. I mean, what are the bluffs in this river? Yeah, I mean they're bluffing. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I guess you're kind of figuring out, I mean they're pretty much bluffing. It looks like everything at the bottom range because there's really not much in there. So
yeah, it's basically bluffing because like we face 3/4 pad on the flop, so we basically continue with these offsuit combos with backdoor flush draw, so they are bluffing pure, and then our like a little bit worse blockers that go for the smaller sizing mainly.
mm-hmm.
Like these 9-8 here has pretty bad blockers to villains flush combos, so they want to go for the smaller sizing, and then our ace size with the ace and clubs have very good blockers, so they go for the larger sizing.
It's like a Pot Omaha play right here, all in on the river with the 8. Now, yeah, this is very interesting. So you're saying that you're able to pick up on these exploits, or do you find this is a common trend across most patterns or most formations or most river runouts? Do you find that this sort of shift in strategy is going to often be there?
Yeah, definitely, because I think that most players just in general are too passive. So if we change things slightly, then we will see like a very different output. And just by understanding what villain is supposed to do, and then seeing a showdown that he's doing something wrong. For example, here, if we block and he's calling pocket aces, we know, okay, he's not raising enough. And then just by picking this up, we're able to adjust our strategy, right? But the problem is, if we didn't know that aces are supposed to raise, we don't know that he's making a mistake. And that's why the first step should always be, okay, what's supposed to happen in theory? Yeah.
Interesting. That makes sense. So that's our answer. That's basically number one, right? So we want to figure out, okay, what's happening in theory? How do we check what's happening in theory? We can go here and we can take a look and we can see how we're splitting our range, and then how, because I guess if we're not splitting our range and we study, we're supposed to split our range and they're supposed to respond this way, but then we're not doing that. Let's say here, for example, you're always betting your flushes overbet on the river as a standard, right? Without even knowing exactly what's supposed to happen. So you're sort of just like building a strategy that, I don't know. How do you think about that? I mean, does that make sense to you?
What do you mean?
Let's say on the river, right? You're saying, okay, you're supposed to understand what happens in theory, but let's say you're not really applying the theory. You're using a different strategy, a different way to think about it. You're kind of studying against outputs that maybe aren't relevant. So I guess how would you think about that? Because not everyone's necessarily going to use a big block. I feel like a lot of players don't use a block river strategy in general. They just use basically we're saying they should maybe use it, or I don't know. I guess I think some people don't really split their sizes very often. They just go simplified strategy.
That's true. If we're the button here, not the big blind, it's kind of the same thought process, right? For example, let's say our opponent, if he uses block sizing, he's never putting any strong hands into the block sizing, right? And that's then we can just massively attack that by basically bluffing our entire range.
Right, which is a very common weaker player thing you see, is that they bet big when they have a strong hand on the river, and when they block, you pretty much know that you can auto raise them because they don't have top of their range because they would have bet bigger.
Yeah, exactly.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, this is gonna be a good video. I'm already like getting a lot of thoughts moving through my head. So okay. Yeah, I never really thought much, because I never thought much about the out of position and how to split the block and the overbet. I mean, I thought a lot about it, but I've never quite heard you explain it the way you explained it. And then the exploit does make a lot of sense. Whereas if they're deviating from just raising and betting more, then you got to reformulate your approach out of position. So
Yeah, I can show you a different river node if you want to.
sure.
It's very similar here. So it's the same positions, button opens, big blind calls, flop, the button bet small, big blind calls, turn goes check check, and the river is a queen, right? And now we have a pretty similar thing going on. We see that our trips, so our strong hands, basically never go for the small sizing. They always go for the very large sizing, and our hands like pocket eights and our very strong hands want to go for the block sizing. And again, let's say we block a hand like queen 4 and villain raisins, we can't jam for value because it's not strong enough. So these hands want to go right away into the big betting line. They could check raise, but they definitely don't want to block because we don't maximize the EV for these hands by blocking. And then I think that's very logical for most players to bet our medium strength hands for the smaller sizing, right? Our 8x here. And then again, we see that our absolute strong hands, or queen 6 or queen deuce, go for the block again, right? Because
we're going with the block with our hands that we want to. So we balance the block with the weaker hands, and then you have some very nutted combos you put in the block size that can reopen the action.
Exactly.
Then if you want to reopen the action on the river, you want to think about having a bluff also in that potential combo, which I guess is the third level to this equation, which I mean, I know that seems like a hard one to get to, but that's what the prodigies are doing, or the Linus Loves are doing, or these goats are doing, is they're figuring out, okay, when the actions reopen, they're able to sort of like flip their mind over and say, okay, now I need to find bluffs too, because if I don't have enough bluffs, then I can't do that. So this is probably where the whole block raise meta comes in, I guess, right?
Yeah, it becomes very complicated, but I think for the viewers, the most important stuff is just to think about, okay, what's supposed to happen in theory, that you know the baseline. Then you ask yourself, how is my opponent deviating here to be able to basically max exploit them? That's, what the viewers should mainly think about, I think.
Okay, cool. Yeah, let's focus on that. So so now we would kind of do the same thing where if we thought they weren't raising enough, then we would probably be betting bigger with our queen 6 and our queen deuce and our best eights and pretty much all of our queens. Then so you wouldn't really be using the split. I guess then your blocks would be your eights still, and then some bluffs as well too. So
we become very unbalanced, but that doesn't matter because people don't exploit us. So we want to exploit their mistakes. So we don't care about our range anymore.
Right. And then this situation, I guess we're gonna find the same thing. So so that would be what we're noting here, right? Okay, so I mean, do you do this in every spot, or I guess it's just you sort of know with your nutted hands that you can bet, you want to bet smaller against some players who can raise the appropriate amount, and then versus players who aren't raising enough, you're just betting bigger with your strongest value hands, I'm guessing, then checking and betting bigger.
So what becomes very automatically for me is to know what I'm supposed to do in theory. So that's kind of automatic for me in some spots. But then if I face, like, I mainly play live and I face so many different opponents who make like a lot of mistakes, I kind of have to think about it every time. Okay, at this spot, what I think, what are they doing wrong? And I basically skip step 1 because I know this mainly, and then I go to step 2 always and think about, okay, what are they doing wrong and how can I exploit this?
Okay, so let's go back. Can we go back to our question list and maybe see where so we kind of have that first question figured out. Okay, well, what are they supposed to do in theory? We know in theory they're supposed to raise, they're supposed to call. Versus small bet, they're supposed to raise, they're supposed to call, they're supposed to fold. Against a bigger bet, typically they're raising less, they're calling at a certain frequency, and they're folding at a certain frequency. So now I guess we'd say, okay, what does my range want to do in general? So I guess what does your range want to do in general? So you're basically saying from out of position standpoint, we always want to have a small bet and we want to have a big bet and we want to have a check. So that would be a question I'd want to ask myself is on this river, what do I want to bet small with? What do I want to bet big with? And then what do I want to check with?
Mm-hmm.
And then my other third question was our thinnest value hand, our best bluff, and our mandatory gift up. So that could kind of go inside of your question process when you're saying, what does my range want to do? What does my top pair want to do? Okay, what is my thinnest value hand? That might be second pair with the king, second pair with the queen. My best bluffs might be the reverse blockers to what I want my opponent to be folding. Mandatory give ups might be the worst, the hands that we want them to ideally fold. We want, we have the worst blockers to bluff with in a situation. And then kind of go down to number two, what are my opponents doing wrong? So that might be okay, kind of what we just described there, where if I block bet, are they overfolding? Okay, if I block bet, are they over raising? And then if I check to them, are they under or over bluffing? And then if they're over bluffing, then I guess you're going to study, because you're going to study what that theory is. I guess that person, you're just, I guess that's the question. I mean, I'm just making assumptions. I'm kind of trying to walk through the framework to make sure I understand it and kind of see your thoughts on it. But so that might be how I might think about that. It might be how I might run through that. And that's maybe how someone else could do it. Or what do you think about that?
Yeah, exactly. So there are so many different spots. So I would probably pick my questions very specific to the spot. For example, if we face a jam, we ask ourselves, okay, what is it supposed to bluff here? What is this thinnest value hand, and what is actually going on? Like, what is he doing? And then, for example, if we are the one who's jamming, then we can ask ourselves, okay, is he calling too much? Is he folding too much? If we go for like a smaller sizing, we can ask ourselves, is he raising enough? And if he doesn't, we can basically bet thinner, right? And basically picking the right questions for the fitting situation.
Right, and that's why on the river, I think the general concept on the river and position is you want to bet bigger. But I mean, there are spots where you do bet smaller, and I guess the thesis is that against the smaller bet, the out of position is going to be supposed to be raising you more. But I don't think most people necessarily always use that size. So if you're not raising enough, then I guess maybe you can even bet with it more. But I guess understanding that process, understanding, okay, this guy's never raising the river, I can bet small as for thinner value and not have to worry about ever getting bluffed here. So just understanding those common situations and responses you're going to see versus your bets, and then having a game plan built out to identify that in real time, and then understanding how to shift your range one way up or other in the game tree is how you might think about it.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. And then are you thinking about math? I mean, are you thinking, because that's one thing I've been really trying to get honed down lately is, I'm out of position, they bet 20%. Are you able to know, okay, in this real time, I'm supposed to be defending, 85% of my hands or 75% of my hands, and then out of that 75% of my hands, I'm supposed to be raising 15%. So when you're building your strategy as the defender, okay, well, I'm deviating from what theory should be in this way, and I'm noticing that my opponent just keeps block betting here, and they're not betting their biggest flushes for value when I'm not raising enough. So then you're kind of able to counter, even exploit, and really pick up on certain things from their size, and then figure out how to deviate from there further. Is that a thing that you know how to do, or am I making that up, or what do you think?
Yeah, I think about math. So I can show you in hand. I think this will illustrate this. So basically, thinking about math, I probably only do this against opponents where I'm not sure how to exploit them, because let's say I know in theory this is a bluff catcher, right? And I know that my opponent is not bluffing enough. Then I don't care about math and just fold, because I know this hand is not making any money. So, but if I face someone that's very good and I know, okay, he's likely finding enough bluffs, then I often try to think, okay, how much of my range I'm meant to defend here. But yeah, like I think math is definitely helpful, but against most players, I basically just think about what they're doing wrong, and then I go directly into like basically pure folding my bluff catchers or pure calling.
Interesting. So that would be your exploit as the defender.
Yeah.
How might you think about that as the aggressor? Is it the opposite where okay, my opponent is overfolding their weakest hands, their weak top pairs or their weakest value hands, overfolding, then so you're able to kind of pick up on that in real time to know, okay, maybe I want to overbluff here, or maybe I want to underbluff here. And then against the better players, you're able to, okay, this guy's a better player. He's capable of making some plays. I might want to just approach it from what I believe is a theoretical way to do that versus a sort of standard, maybe GTO player. So you sort of have that gear where you're able to, have 5 different ways to think about it depending on your opponent. It sounds like that's what you're really good at on the river then.
Yeah. So if we are the one who's jamming ourselves, so let's say we jam on the river for pot. This means we need to have 2/3 value and 1/3 bluff, right? And if I face someone that's very good, who's likely defending correctly, I think a little bit more about it. Like, okay, how much of our range can be bluffs here, basically? But if I face someone that's more on the weaker side, I basically just think about, is he folding too much or is he calling too much? And then I like in most spots this is also something when I learned from my coach back then, is that he told me that he basically in most live games he's basically just bluffing pure on the river with all his bluffs against most players, or just giving up most bluffs. Because if people heavily fold too much, we can basically bluff everything, and if they call too much, we need to check basically everything, give up. So I think it's more helpful because also you have limited time in game to think about this. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that simplified way to think about it. It's a pretty interesting way to just just do it.
Yeah, because in the solver you see there's so much mixing going on, but in practice when people are heavily unbalanced, there's basically not much mixing going on because every decision is very pure now, right? There's very little indifference.
Mm-hmm. You want to walk us through this hand and maybe show us this principle in action?
Yeah. So it's a 3-way pot. Cut off opens, button 3 bets, cut off calls. On this ace king 5 flop, the button is betting small for 20%. Cut off is calling. On the turn, the button is heavily polarizing, going with like ace jack plus, betting little over pot. Cut off calls, and now on the river, on the jack and diamonds, we face a jam as cutoff. So in this spot, many players say, I have like ace jack, how can I fold here? Right? And this is often the wrong approach, and people kind of get lost and think, oh shit, like, what am I doing here? And getting like overwhelmed.
Well, this is overwhelming. This is a pretty overwhelming spot.
Yeah.
Block, flop, or a small bet flop, polarized turn, and then you shove the river, especially when the board runs out the flush. I mean, what hands are you really having here that you ever are happy with?
Yeah,
as
exactly.
opposition player? It's
Exactly.
just like, this is how, what flush, jack 10, queen jack suited, you don't really have those now with the jack of diamonds. So I guess you're even like 9-10 of diamonds, 5-4 of diamonds. If you're 5-6 of diamonds, maybe something like that are your flushes. Yeah. And then outside of that, you don't really have many hands. Like you said, ace jack suited probably are, and even sometimes maybe you mix fold that in the turn, but that would, so you don't have many hands. So I guess in a spot like this where your range is just super weak, it is hell, right?
Yeah, exactly. So that's why it's kind of getting overwhelming, and that's why I would always recommend that you go back to that thought process. So start by what's supposed to happen in theory. Okay, so what is my opponent to bluff here, for example? in the spot. And in this spot, it's very tough to find natural bluffs. Like there are no busted draws here, except some 6-7, for example. But there's basically no busted draw here. So villain needs to find a lot of pairs to bluff. So if we take a look at the jam,
oh wow,
villain is supposed to bluff hands like his lowest pocket pairs with a diamond. He's supposed to pure bluff queen jack with a diamond. He's supposed to bluff jack 10, jack 9, and just finding these hands is pretty tough for most opponents, right? Especially on the turn. People are supposed to pure bluff basically pocket 6s on the turn with a diamond, or just in general pocket 6s, and that's very tough to find. And then we're able to figure out, okay, in this spot, most players are very likely under bluffing because we know what they're supposed to bluff, but in practice, basically nobody is fighting these bluffs.
Interesting. I see what you're saying. So you're able to say, okay, even on the turn, they're not bluffing that. So then by the river, they have even less bluffs. So you have to be very in tune with that and just realize. So that means that they don't have any bluffs, or if they only have 1 or 2 bluffs, you basically need the top of your range to continue, and therefore you have to fold most of your bluff catchers, which then you have to know where does that fall. I mean, and this would be a tough spot where I would assume, ace 5, ace jack, those would be hands that I would normally call with. But if we're exploiting his range, or actually, no luck his range, and saying, okay, he doesn't have these bluffs, then the question is, how tight do you call? And then maybe it just flushes only or something like that. I'm not sure.
And here's basically where math can come in. For example, if you know, okay, let's say we think about villain has no bluffs here, right? Okay, and what is thinnest value hands? Like in theory, villain is supposed to jam ace 5. It's very close. We take a look at the V. In theory, it's very close. It's like a 3 big blind jam. So like in that huge pot, it's very close. So it's basically ace jack plus as value here. So then we can basically count combos, and then we can come up with, okay, how many hands do I beat? How many hands do beat us basically? And then we can, by counting these combos, we can make a decision basically. And if we're getting the right price, we can call. If not, we just fold. And this is very simplified, but it's definitely better than just feeling lost and having no idea what to do on the river.
Yeah, that makes sense. So you basically have a lot of experience counting combinations. You know that the suited hands have usually certain combos, the unsuited hands, and you're able to kind of like decode this game tree right here in your mind. And okay, if I see this ace jack has most of the 12 offsuit combos, I think it is, and then pocket pairs have, I think it's like 3. How many? There's like some simplified chart I've been trying to use recently, but is there like a simple way you think about suited hands, offsuited hands, and pairs for your combos?
What do you mean exactly?
Okay, so if you're gonna count combos here, are you, how do you have like a trick that you can do in real time, or like, how would you go upon doing it?
Yes. I think suited combos is pretty easy because it's just 4. And if, for example, ace king, the king is in diamonds, so we have 3 suited combos of ace king. Offsuit combos can feel a little bit more tricky, but basically the 1 ace is gone and 1 king is gone. So yeah, there are 3 aces and 3 kings. So then we can basically go from there and think about that. But I think it definitely helps to kind of like if you're off the table to study that basically that basic poker math that will definitely help you in game.
Yeah, so I'm getting better at identifying the combos at rapid speed and real time. And I feel like that's the key to Hold'em, is being able to do that on the river, and then you sort of know, okay, when they have too many bluff hands. And I guess even using that, how do you think about using that as the aggressor? So if I know that they're calling very wide on the turn, and I know on the river that they're willing to fold those hands in the river to a big bet, then, there's some sort of like reverse combination process where you're able to put the combos in to your bet sizing strategy to know that you're supposed to go bigger, or is that also a thing that you might use as the aggressor?
So let's say there's pot left, so I know, okay, I'm supposed to have 2/3 value and 1/3 bluff. I think if you are not really sure what's supposed to happen in theory, then it definitely helps to count combos. And if you think that your opponent is defending correctly and come to the conclusion that you have too many bluffs by counting your bluffing combos, then okay, I probably have to give up some. So, but yeah, if you know what's supposed to happen and know what you're supposed to fold, then I think it becomes a little bit more easy, because when you know, okay, I'm always gonna jam Queen Jack here with 1 diamond, because I know this is supposed to happen. And I also know villain is supposed to fold most aces, but I know that guy's a huge station, so he never folds an ace, then I'm just never bluffing. I think this helps a little bit more, because counting combos can become, like it definitely helps when you're not sure, but when you know what's supposed to happen, I think this is a bit more effective, in my opinion.
Yeah, okay, interesting. Okay, so this would be a spot on the river where you would just be able to say, okay, they don't have many bluffs. It's kind of an easier spot to identify, and then you would fold anything but a flush. But if you don't have a flush here, I guess you're just folding everything. Is that kind of what you're saying then?
You
just gotta fold everything.
Yeah, there are certain players who definitely have bluffs here. Like if you face a very good opponent that's very aggressive, you definitely have to defend more, and you can maybe even defend basically everything, because he might bluff 6s to 9s too much. He can, right? But against basically everyone, I think that's a good heuristic for most people. If it's tough to find natural bluffs, like a natural bluff is a bluff that is like a busted draw, that's very natural to find. If then, if there's no natural bluff, we can very likely overfold most spots and don't make a mistake against most players, right? Because let's say the board is a little bit different. Just as an example, the board is like this, like this, for example, right? Here there are so many bluffs. Like there's ace, king, king, queen, ace, queen, all the busted flush draws, and we see that villain is meant to give up a lot, right? He's meant to give up ace, king, queen, queen 9. But if people are overdoing it here, then you can definitely call more. So I think a good heuristic for most people is basically to think about how many natural bluffs are there, and if there are too many natural bluffs, like so many that people need to give up a lot of them, but might kind of get lost and kind of get lost about their frequencies and don't give up too much, then we can call a little bit more, because that's a good heuristic, I think.
So this is interesting, because I was trying to think about this the other day, this exact kind of spot where could I pick, because let's say here king queen or queen 9, I probably wouldn't be bluffing king queen here. My thought process would be that king queen is the hand that we want them to have here. I mean, I want them to have king queen, check call flop, check call overbet turn, and then fold the river. So that might not be, so I might not bluff that hand. I might not bluff queen 9. This might be a spot where I, out of position, even in position, I might not want to bluff my diamonds. I might not want to bluff my hearts. I'd probably bluff like ace king, ace queen with 1 heart, 1 diamond, hands like that had the, I probably would be bluffing with maybe ace queen on this kind of board too. So yeah, it's kind of interesting. I'm trying to think of my own strategy, what my own strategy might be here. So you're basically saying that there is a way to use this natural bluff heuristic to start to identify how to combat that as not a position player, and then even building your strategy here. So how would you use this natural bluff? I guess you wouldn't be using a natural bluff here as the aggressor. You'd use it more as a defender.
What do you mean exactly?
Okay, so let's say it's checked you on the button here. You're deciding which combos to bluff. Like you gotta bluff here on the river.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you're trying to pick, okay, what are my most natural bluffs? I guess you're, you know, how do you know you're bluffing too much here? I mean, if you think your opponent's overfolding, are you just bluffing everything then? Or how would you sort of think about your thought process in this river?
So mainly, like, we know that we definitely need to give up some bluffs, and the first give ups basically come from our ace king and ace queen because they have some showdown value. For example, and like ace king beats king queen and hearts, right? So we have some showdown value. You can see this, for example, here, ace king with no hearts and no diamond definitely wants to jam, right? Because we unblock the folds and we block suited calls. Like we block ace jack king jack suited, which is pretty decent. But we see that most of our offsuits, ace king and ace queens with a diamond or a heart, just give up because they block folds, especially with diamonds. So in game, I would probably know this and give up them first, right? And then basically, we don't have many other bluffs to choose from. So king queen, even though it blocks folds too, right? It's kind of one of our only bluffs. Sure, we have some queen nines, but there's not much left basically. So yeah, we can make it math depending again. We can think about, okay, let's say there's pot left on the river, so we have to have 2/3 value. We jam our aces, kings, queens, and ace jacks, and jacks and tens. So then we can basically think, okay, we have that amount of bluffs value, and then we go back to, okay, how many bluffs are we allowed to have here? Then we can count them basically and come to a conclusion. But yeah, I think the first question is, we should always ask ourselves here, is our opponent folding enough or not folding enough? And if we know that he's not folding enough, we basically give up everything.
I see.
Yeah. But
kind of going back to the first heuristic that you talked about, which is that if they are overcalling, then you give up. If they're overfolding, then you bluff everything.
Yeah, exactly. So
okay, now I'm liking them. I'm kind of picking this up.
Yeah, in game people make so many mistakes, so basically don't respect most players. They are so bad. Like there's something that Yuri Pelek said. He said that basically all players below high stakes are fish, and that's true. Because like people make so many mistakes that you kind of should not respect people too much, like when it comes to their ability. So mostly people are very unbalanced, and we can make very pure decisions, basically giving up too much or just bluffing everything. And yeah,
interesting. So that's why a lot of players say you don't use balance at live poker or against certain types of players, because you're saying there's always a best decision against most players, and you should be able to identify that if you're a good player.
Yeah, exactly, because indifference exists, right? Because some decisions are very close in EV against someone perfect, but if opponent is deviating and not playing perfect, there's one decision that is always going to be better. And if you figure out that, then you will make so much money live poker basically, and in all poker basically.
Yeah, I love this. This is great. This is gonna make me. I feel like I made $10 million or more on this conversation right here, and because this is kind of the spot I wouldn't say struggling with lately, but something I realized I just don't have a framework for it, and I started building it based off some of your research that you've been putting out. I've been loving your research, so this is like the extension of that conversation, which is great. I appreciate the kind of breakdown, and I guess so. For your major takeaways, we have our couple heuristics. It sounds like we have a aggressive heuristic, which is underfold. They underfold, then we underbluff. We never bluff. If they overfold, we always bluff. And then you have the the defending heuristic, which is around the natural bluffs. And if they don't have enough natural bluffs here, then we fold more. If they have more natural bluffs, we can call more. If we know that they are not bluffing enough, we always fold. If we know that they're bluffing too much, then we can sometimes always call.
Yeah. So when making exploits, sure, we need to be careful, because let's say we make like a huge deviation that if our assumptions are wrong, we just butcher like infinite money. Then we should be more sure about our read. But in general, there are so many spots where decisions are very close in EV in theory. And if we just have a slight assumption that this player might be folding like a little bit less, then we can often know, okay, we should probably just give up our indifferent bluffs. So the smaller the exploit is, the less reads we need, basically.
So the smaller the exploit is, the less reads we need. The bigger the exploit, the better the read that you need.
Yeah, because let's say we just assume, okay, he's very likely, he's maybe doing this, but if we're wrong, we butcher like 50 big blinds. Then we should be more certain about that.
So then, okay, this seems like a Prodigy takeaway, because when I had Prodigy, I was talking to him, he was saying he's very good at finding these asymmetrical river advantages where if he makes one wrong move the other, it's a small mistake, but he's able to pick up on spots where he potentially has a huge win rate compared to theory, and he's apparently able to find these exploits in even the best players in the world. So you're kind of extending that idea out with some frameworks and questions to ask, and then you got to do the work and kind of look through Wizard and start putting real data to numbers, and then figure out, okay, here are the spots. Maybe there are, maybe there's another heuristics, I don't know, but it sounds like the best players are able to identify those spots in real time and know, okay, here's where I got a huge opportunity to win a bunch of chips that a normal player might just miss and not give in. So you say that's probably like the biggest edge, or one of the biggest edges you can have in poker.
Yeah,
I see.
exactly.
Wow. Okay. Cool. Yeah. I mean, that makes sense. So I feel like those are takeaways. That's probably what takeaway. Anything you think for me or for anyone watching that you might not have pointed out, or out of all the content that you want them to remember, kind of going into the next session?
Yeah. So most people have like a big discussion always about if it's necessary to think about theory on low stakes games, and I think that you should be thinking about like this. The solver is not a tool for memorization. It's a tool that you are able to understand the game on a deeper level. So a solver will definitely help you always on any level, but you need to use it effectively, and that's very important. But if you can use it effectively, it will definitely help you on all stakes. So don't be afraid to use the solver, right? Because there are so many players who kind of hate on solvers and say, yeah, it doesn't make sense to use them on my games, and that's the wrong approach in my opinion.
So you're saying that you got to really learn what the tool is for, learn how to use the data and the outputs, and that's a big skill, right? The skill is in using and understanding how to utilize the different features or different range breakdowns or different node locking, and being able to maximize that is the part you should maybe think about more, versus just running more hands in the trainer, which is kind of something I did for a while, where ever since I've been trying to learn more what all this data means, how it connects to the numbers, how it connects to the sizing, and those have been things that I've been able to, I guess, enhance my thought process out of what it was before.
Yeah, so kind of instead of going into the sim and kind of checking if you made the right play, that's something I wouldn't do. I would probably more go into the sim with a couple of different questions to myself to find out what's happening, to understand the spot, and then basically going from there. Okay, now I know what's supposed to happen. Now I can pick up on things that people like deviate from. And yeah, if you do this, basically like using the tool for understanding purposes, it will definitely help you on, yeah.
So it's like ChatGPT for poker, where you got to ask them the right question. Because in ChatGPT, if you go, hey, like, what's my, what should I do today? They're going to give you one question. If you say, what should I do today? Like, here's how I'm feeling. Here's what I'm up to. Here's what I'm, here's my other context of my life and situation. Then it'll give you a way different answer. So it sounds like you are, what are those questions? Okay. So you said the questions, what are there a couple of heuristical questions that you might take into every single hand that you might be looking for? Because it sounds like you're pretty locked in.
Yeah, I can give you an example that's very quick. It's button opens, big blind calls, and we have this board texture, for example, right? We bet our entire range here on the flop for small, and the big blind raises, right? And now in game, let's say we fold a hand like Jack 9 suited, and then we come back to the solver and say, man, I did the wrong move. I should have called pure. But that's the wrong approach, right? Because what you should do here, you should ask yourself, okay, what is my opponent check raising? And this is like never ever happening, and if people not check raising enough, then we can actually start to fold these hands more often. So that's the thing you should do. Basically, go into the solver with a couple of different questions, and not just checking if you made the right play. That doesn't make any sense.
I see. Okay.
Yeah.
So you want to have some questions. I want to go to this hand. I want to say, okay, I got check raised here. How often am I supposed to be defending? I think Jack 9. I could be calling, but against a player who's never check raising, I'm probably just going to fold that hand. So you're kind of checking that assumption. You're kind of going into this maybe with an assumption and then some ideas and say, okay, well, if I think he is raising that amount, then how can I sort of respond?
Yeah, exactly.
You'd go into it with that thought process versus like, oh, I should have called here because it said to call, but not really looking at what they're raising with. And if they're raising 30% and then they're actually raising 5%, then you're supposed to be folding those hands.
Exactly. It's important that you know what's supposed to happen, right? Because when you know that we are meant to call Jack 9, and we face someone that's very good, we know, okay, in the spot we're meant to call that we don't get run over by someone very good. But if we face someone weaker that's not check raising enough, we kind of know what's supposed to happen, and then we can deviate again. And you can do this with AI. Basically, go into the big blind's range, node lock, and then you see what's the output, and that will also help you. So I would definitely suggest that you use AI to kind of run experiments and kind of get a good feeling what you're supposed to do against certain player types.
Yeah, that makes sense. That seems like where the skill is these days, is node locking, understanding how to deviate versus different archetypes, and then how to build your own strategies as well, which maybe are unorthodox or different sizings. And I guess that's where the skill is. So, but yeah, maybe that's a topic for next time, how to effectively use the wizard. But I appreciate the insight. I think we got a lot of good stuff. I'm feeling like I'm ready to go grind for a 10-hour session now and ready to lock in. So we'll throw up our takeaways, and as always, people that watch this video, hope you guys really enjoyed it. Let us know if you guys have any takeaways, have any thoughts, have any ideas. This is we're always studying. And Vanja, one of my first times working with you, I appreciate all the insights, appreciate all the information.
Yeah, sure.
Definitely put me on a lot of game. Yeah, I'm going to be thinking about this a lot. I'm going to be thinking about it a lot. I'm trying to be the river goat. I'm going to tell you, Vanja, I'm coming back to you next time we talk, and I better know this shit. So that'll be great. Our task for next time. Maybe how to effectively study with the Wiz, and then do I understand the whole small bet versus big bet, picking the river, and the sort of the river framework question thought process. I want to have that internalized too, so now I know which boom. So those would be my goals, and yeah, I appreciate it, man.
Okay, bye guys.